the preparedness in the job market, and if we were to do healthcare specialization, where is the University of Chicago on that map?
Well, I think it depends in large part on what you're interested in doing and things. And there's a range of options here. So, like in many good universities, you get to do some choosing. One of the things that makes our system different, I think, is that in many places you would find things largely located in a school of public health or in a program possibly that could be in the business school that would be sort of management oriented. We have elements of all of that around campus, and you can specialize in any one of them and go to them, and we actually collaborate with them on various aspects. But the difference would be if you were to think about specific topics and specific things, some places will have greater strengths than others. So for example, here, if you were more a health administration orientation and things, then there's a program known as the GFAP program, which has been around for years. It's a certificate program which you can build on top of your MPP. It can be done jointly with the students who are in the MHA, the Masters in Health Administration program over at SSA. There are MBA students involved in it. You can pick up a range of public administration as well as sort of private sector arrangement skills, if that's sort of where you see yourself going. If, on the other hand, you're interested in a variety of things which have to do with, for example, the work that's being discussed about comparative effectiveness research and such, we have a really strong unit that's partially based here, partially based in the medical school, and there are lots of offerings. I teach the first part of a sequence in that, and there's a whole year in which you can sort of work on that if you want to do things. We teach health economics, health policy, medical sociology. If you need to pick up some epidemiology along the way, recently had a set of students, one of whom was interested in kids and poor families, another interested in questions that had to do with mental health. We were able to find, sort of the core of what they needed here, and things from sort of the policy, the economics, and the politics kind of side, but pick up in addition epidemiology and that was relevant, as well as some things that went to child and family issues and stuff. So there are a variety of things you can kind of pull together. Given how big the health sector is, though, to know how it's going to work for you, one would have to know exactly kind of what you saw yourself interested in and things, because then one could talk about specifics a great deal. Generally, we have quite a presence on campus, the health community here. In fact, there's this. It's not just this GFAP program, this graduate certificate that's being done, but there's a substantial group in epidemiology across a range of different kinds of epidemiology, biostatistics, medical sociology. Let's see, I think the last count there were 5 health economists on campus who call themselves health economists, which means that's kind of their primary area that they're interested in. I think it's now 5 on the faculty. In terms of things, we have international people who do some international. We're trying to build that part up. And we have Dan Bennett providing that. So there are a number of things we can do. But by the same token, there might be particular areas of concern that there might be other alternatives available and such. It would depend. It's a sixth of the economy, so what can I say? I'm not sure we can cover everything in great depth, although we really have quite a few people available. I should have brought the GFAP roster, the current GFAP roster. It just shows you the courses through the year that you can take. And it's put together in part so that students don't line up to take things that compete at the same two courses that they're interested in direct conflict. It kind of actually works to sandwich the courses together so that if a lot of people want to run off to a particular EPI course, it's not right on top of, say, that health policy course that many of the same people would be taking and stuff. So, and that's coordinated out of the social work school, but many of the students who are involved in that program are Harris students. I think the biggest single contingent are Harris students who are doing their core work here and then taking the extra courses. Some of the courses we teach, some of them are taught by SSA, some of them are taught by the Department of Health Studies, which is like a community medicine department if you were looking at either Dartmouth or Wisconsin, but it's not a full-blown school of public health like Berkeley, Michigan, or Harvard.
Right.
But it doesn't have a number of things that a school of public health would have. Here we don't have toxicology, not that kind of toxicology. We have the other kind of toxicology, more the sort of the basic science toxicology and things. But I mean, an example might help a little bit of a subject area question.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think that, I'm kind of hoping that my MPP degree will focus me a little more, so I don't have the specific subject area question.
Okay. Well, I think in that case, we cover the basics that somebody would want very well. We have really strong core sequences in microeconomics and political economy. And just watching the debate this last year, you can't understand what came out of Congress if you don't understand some elements of both of those and things. It was not an economist's dream. There were trade-offs made. It was just, the typical kind of sausage making that we talk about, collective action problems and such. You can get the quantitative skills, and if you need more, we either offer them ourselves, or in fact we've over the years sent, depending on the specific interests of the student by that point, sort of the beginning of the second year, we've sent them elsewhere across campus. So Paul Rathouse is actually one of the favorite professors on campus. He's a colleague of mine in the other department I'm in this health studies / community medicine department. And so people go over there, take an EPI course if they need to know more about medical processes and that sort of thing. If the issues you're worried about are questions about, at that point, are sort of gravitating toward family health issues and worrying about poverty and that sort of thing, combination of courses that Professor Michael and Khalil teach separately, actually are really quite helpful in thinking about it. And so the student we had a couple of years ago in the PhD program actually cobbled together a health program around issues of insurance coverage and poverty, and by picking the courses that I've been mentioning from these various places and then building it on top of the formal coursework here, as well as the health policy coursework here in the school in terms of things.
I would say too that I actually graduated from Harris about 6 years ago, so I'm in the panel coming up. But I would say the quarter system too really works to your advantage in terms of taking, the core doesn't take up as much of your opportunities as it might somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So my sister was in a program at a different school, and she only had a couple of options. So having sort of those extra 2 terms that you might not have elsewhere, and really does allow you to go across the midway to the the economics department, business school.
Right. So I don't know how much you got out to walk, but we keep talking about going across the way. So this isn't like, my favorite example is either Cambridge or Berkeley. So if you want to get to the medical school or the School of Public Health, here it's a 10-minute walk. If you stop for coffee, it's 12, okay? At the outside. That probably involves running into somebody and chatting and stuff. It's really close. You can walk 15 minutes from the northwest corner to the southeast, longest distance on campus, as long as you don't stop at the bookstore, and then all bets are off.
Yeah.
But you go to Berkeley or you go to Cambridge, and in Berkeley's case, if you want to go to the medical school, you've got to take the BART, or worse yet, you got to face the Bay Bridge. They're separate campuses. They're far apart. People think twice about doing things and things. And you've got to take that ride over to the Back Bay if you're in Cambridge, go to the Longwood campus, or even on some other places, it may be far away. Not everything place is so tightly knit. And so what that means is that we get together regularly with people from the medical school. The seminar on health economics and health policy is held in that room. And we get doctors who come over if they're interested. We get people from the econ department, which is just literally across the Midway. And that proximity makes it easier for people to collaborate and do than they would on a campus which was split.
Right. Oh, that's good.
And things. And it also makes collaborations that way. So one of the options that becomes available to the faculty and indirectly to the students is that you may find out about something going on over in the medical schools. So we've had both master's students and doctoral students who end up working with somebody across the way. And in one case that I know, you may remember Carol Ann Dye. She should have overlapped with you.
Yeah.
Well, she started off doing that and working with Caleb Alexander over in the medical school. He ended up being on our thesis committee, and it actually, the work kind of went off in a different direction, but she ended up getting interested about it and ended up with a committee that had, economists and, direct medical input into what she was doing. And that also happens at the master's level too. People will end up, especially if they come in with a desire to, to do that sort of thing. Sometimes during the summer, sometimes during the course of the second year.
I mean, because I know I would be interested in a research assistantship, and so I could probably look here in policy school, or if you went over to.
Although I suspect one of the things you want to be careful about, and this is based on not just here but other places I've been, is if you've been out for a little while, you want to be careful about overcommitting in the first part of the first year, because it actually does take a little while to get back into the swing of it. In fact, it's actually the concern is usually palpable, and the mood actually breaks at midterms when the grades go back, and stuff. People are worried, and anybody who starts taking on other obligations at that point often ends up worrying a little bit about whether they're doing well enough. But once they find that they're back in the swing of it and have a sense of what the workload's really going to be for them, and such, then you can start looking around. We're only talking about a few weeks and stuff, but you can start and stuff.
Short.
Yeah. Well, typically start the last week of October. I mean, the last week of September,
right.
First at latest the first week of October.
Campus
Oh wow,
right?
that's
Yeah.
It is. It's very late.
Or
Yeah, they still have math camp.
sounds like earlier.
Right. And then the finals of the fall are often in the second week of December. You come back right after New Year's, sort of the following Monday or Tuesday is typically the first day of class, unless you get one of those weird combinations where, it falls right, New Year's falls sort of like on Friday or something of that sort. And then you go off to spring break around middle of March, come back to the end of the first week, and stuff, and we go until the end of June. But you've got roughly 11-week terms to do things. You can get your sense of what's going on and start to meet people, start to find out about which projects are in the works. how you do in some of the core courses may actually provide you with opportunity to find out about things. If you can build on experiences, or you can go knocking on doors to get to meet people to find out what they're doing. In the fall, we often have a series of brown bags so that you can meet the faculty who aren't teaching you the core courses. And I know on the international front that Charlie Glazer, who was the associate dean and who did national security issues, often met the students both in his official role and then would come around and talk to them a little bit, because he was not likely to see any first-year master's students otherwise, and you'd only think of him as the associate dean if it weren't for the fact that he could come in and talk about the kind of start things that were happening this week, or what the issues were, or was it really a change in the U.S. posture vis-a-vis the use of nuclear weapons, and how many times over to excess capacity did we need to have, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Or you could get other people to come in and talk about their things.
So I've heard a lot about the core in the first year. Is it really, truly overwhelming and, all math intensive, or is it excessive in comparison to other schools?
Well, it depends in part on where you're applying, but more importantly, it depends on what your background is.
Right.
So, for example, if you come out of an economics background, I think that kind of preparation that you get there probably would stand you in very good stead, and possibly you could exempt out of the fall course in micro. There's a similar issue for the poli-sci majors. Now, a lot of policy students come in because they got interested in the policy process, or they didn't quite fit one of those two traditional roles and things. And if they were on a less quantitative path, then they're going to need to sort of burnish their skills. But we have a mechanism in place to do so. We have something called Math Camp before the fall starts.
I'll be going to that.
Well, actually, you have to. At least you have to take the test.
Right.
Some
people who are math whizzes don't go because they can just pass the test, no problem.
Right, but that's a small fraction. And things.
Very small.
But people coming out of certain kinds of programs, they're well prepared. There's no issue about it. But the level of math that people are expecting is basically, if you were an undergraduate econ major, what you might have done during your junior year.
Sure. Okay.
And stuff, and in terms of things. So it's going to involve some calculus, but it's not going to be, you're not going to have to know all the complexities of linear algebra to get through statistics or anything of that sort. So you're going to have to use some calculus, both differentiate for the economists and learn to integrate for the statisticians. And
I was
things.
a journalism major, and it can be a little intense because everyone is just so not competitive, but just it's a school full of overachievers. I think you're going to get that anywhere. People who go to grad school are just anxious to do well, and but the math camp really, I didn't understand calculus until then,
Really?
and I took it in high school, and I just the way that it's taught at a different, it's not taught at like the math level, it's taught at how to actually use it.
Right, that's good.
So that really, a lot of my friends were in the same boat. They just they were like, oh, I took economics in college and I hated it, and then they actually came here and saw the usefulness of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I was an econ major at Wisconsin. So I've
Okay, so you shouldn't have any problem from Wisconsin.
No, but I get nervous just because Chicago is the powerhouse of economics, and I'm feel like, oh, what if it wasn't
Right.
up
So-
to par, and I'm going to be behind or something.
So if you went to Wisconsin, you might have had the undergraduate variant as your intermediate microtext. I think that's the same one.
So,
Yeah, I think that's the same text we're using in the fall.
okay.
Now, the thing that's going to be different about what we do and what you got as a part of a standard econ undergraduate degree is, needless to say, in the second quarter we worry about market pathology and rationales for government intervention and all the anomalous cases that generate kind of public policy problems. So the thing that's tucked at the back of the syllabus and that nobody ever gets to in intermediate micro is actually the soul of what the winter quarter is about.
Oh, okay.
And so worrying about externalities in public goods, excludability, how auctions work. I don't know. Did you have down Corsi talking about auctions? Yeah.
That was like the hit of
Right.
of the first year. I mean, because it gets you thinking about these strange things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something that you wouldn't have thought of before, but could happen.
Right.
And you're coming up with the solutions.
Or I think one year he also, he doesn't teach it that course anymore, but one year he talked about the fact that normally you would expect the poor to live in areas which have severe degradation and environmental degradation, given the way most metropolitan areas work. Well, it's quite different, and he talks about why and what the issues are and what the implications are, so that you think about what happens with brownfields, which they don't exist down on the south side until you get down to where the steel industry used to be. They occur up on the north side where Rush and a lot of the sort of the trendy parts of place where the MBA students like to live. If there's any irony to it. He actually, Don makes it really quite entertaining and stuff. But he's using things like that to sort of get through and talk through the issues, and also to think about ways of doing remedies. What your options are. So some of those, of course, you can create markets for that don't exist. Some of them you have to think about alternative actions and such. So that course would be different and be new, but of course, if you're interested in public policy, it's sort of the rationale for our existence as distinct for why we're not training MBAs here in terms of things. So that would be a bit different. But if you went through a standard, almost any major university now, I think, teaches undergraduate econ students a level of math that they should be comfortable. They could be rusty. And math camp will help bring them up. They'll take the test. You may even exempt out of the fall term based on what you did and how comfortable you feel with the process, and take something else which has a sort of an economic orientation and things. But I doubt you're going to have problems other than having a Pavlovian reaction to maximization subject to a budget constraint.
Okay. I hope that's the case.
Yeah, no. I don't know enough about Wisconsin to know that it's not starved for math.
Okay, yes, no, that's true.
In terms of things.
Okay, good.
And the winters are milder here.
Yes.
Our lake doesn't freeze over very often.
I know, the winters were brutal, especially because campus is so long, and I had a class all the way by the medical school, and I lived all the way up by the Capitol, which is about 2 miles in very cold weather.
You were talking to a guy who came here from Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
So Madison is a balmy southern climate.
That's very true.
In terms of things. Although we never had anything like the lake cracking. That's one that Madison had on us. The river might crack, but none of the lakes would crack.
Yeah, it was cold. So these winters are a breeze. They're talking about the weather.
Yeah.
Big deal.
Yeah.
So,
and so my other kind of major question in my decision-making process, which maybe you can answer, maybe not, is how, the University of Chicago brand name is, very, very, very strong worldwide. And I'm deciding between, my 3 programs are Southern Cal, University of Washington and University of Chicago, which I realize are all very vastly different. The other two, I'm getting full funding, and that makes life a little bit easier. But you know, I see the other two as being fairly regional in their alumni, and in the jobs and the places that they go, and I just don't know, how do you perceive the University of Chicago's presence overall, and like in my decision-making process, should I think about and wait?
All right. Well, I can't go to the foreign part. I'm really so domestic. That stuff. So, and things. And actually, in health, of course, the University of Washington is a powerhouse, and it goes way back. I think where we differ from other places is in sort of the breadth of the foundation. I think we provide and stuff, and some of the things that are open, but I'm not as familiar with the SC program except in pharmacy. And things, so I can't speak to it. I know that's a strong pharmacy program, but it doesn't sound like necessarily they're there. But you know, I think we're every bit as competitive as Washington is in health, and in some areas they do some things better than we do and things. So, for example, if you were thinking about cancer statistics and such, we had Polly Newcomb here from Fred Hutchinson in the University of Washington last week talking about cancer things. You know, if I was somebody who was motivated about a cancer, I'd be thinking about Fred Hutchinson and the University of Washington. And for the survival stuff, her consultant is Ross Prentice, who's one of the, you know, a real powerhouse in survival statistics methods. We've got strong people too, but you know, most places you go, they'll have some really very strong individuals. So partly it's the answer you want to think about is not just the reputation of the institution, but sort of the breadth of what you're getting and whether it matches what you want to do. USC has a really, I mean, I go places and tell people where I'm from, and I think people usually recognize the location and such and stuff, and in terms of things. And they know historically in health we've had a long presence in the field, going back to the Chas Nork surveys of 63 and 70. A lot of health services started on this campus. Research started on this campus under Oden and Anderson and Luana Day and others, and it kept graduate students who are here. Let's see, the dean at the School of Public Health at Berkeley is actually an alum of this school. The recently retired provost of the University of Rochester got his econ PhD on this campus. That's Charles Phelps and Steve Shortell. And, you know, there's a long track record in terms of how well people have done in terms of things. So I generally don't think there's much of an issue. And I can't talk to the master's market because I wasn't involved in that this year, but I know that all of our PhDs got placed in what is a really bad market.
Yes. Okay. That's good to know.
And things. And I was expecting that some of them to have to possibly take postdocs, but we've gotten several placed at good universities and things. So, and you know, those are the TAs, and some of them are actually taking the same courses as other people. You know, the econ students, who, like you, are an undergraduate econ, are having to learn a little political economy because it's a public policy program. So some of those people in there are the PhD students. I don't know. You've got some more direct experience.
You know, when I was here, I remember, you know, there was a move afoot to sort of get the Harris name out there more, and I think a lot of my classmates were like, well, like we want the UC brand, and I think they've actually done both a good job at both, like keeping, you know, the UFC brand that sort of a broader audience knows, but also in the public policy field. I'm in DC, and you know, government sector and, you know, consulting. They actually do know the Harris name.
Okay.
And I think it's because there are those opportunities, you know, to take classes here. The core is very strong, but also to, you know, to sort of broaden, you know, whether you want to specialize, you know, or whether you want to. I took more of a methodological route because I thought, you know, I was interested in social policy, and I thought I could read about that, but, you know, the like actual methods, you know, that's better learned, you know, in the classroom. So that's, you know, the route that I took. A lot of my friends did more of the, you know, the international human rights stuff, and there's a human rights is it a committee or
right,
program.
and there's the one I'm blanking on the formal name that's affiliated with the poli-sci department.
Right.
So it's the one that's on the backside of the building.
Yeah.
The new one that doesn't quite fit in with the English Gothic exterior.
Yes. Yeah.
This is embarrassing, and the camera's rolling on top of it, and things. But you know, the people make different choices based on their preferences and stuff.
I mean, I think,
and their expectations too. And the important thing is having the choice and things.
you certainly can't go wrong with the name, you know, having that brand, and but, you know, I think beyond that, it's a strong program.
So part of it is just learning how to apply things in terms of it. So if we think about the recent reforms, you know, those bills are going to change probably within a year. You know, learning an awful lot of detail that may be relatively ephemeral might not be useful. But if you were somebody who was interested in health but didn't know an awful lot about some key attributes, or thinking about sort of basic incentive structure issues and other things, there are a variety of ways between sort of getting general picture of things and picking up new skills and others that you can sort of get into the knowledge of it. But we get students in here who know where they want to go.
Yeah.
And we try and accommodate them as well.
I wish I were one of those students.
I still wish I were. Actually, one of my friends who graduated with me, she was one of those. She knew exactly what she wanted, international development, you know, and she got into the State Department as not as foreign service, but, you know, civil servant, and it wound up leading to a detail at the White House, and she was like chief of like health international health things at the White House. And you know, it was just kind of like,
That's great.
I wish I had your direction.
Yeah.
And ambition. But she was she was definitely one that came in and knew the road she wanted to take.
Right. But one of the things to also think about, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the idea that you're going to go and learn about new things that you haven't been exposed to. If we think about where you've been historically, there may be whole areas that you're generally interested in, but you haven't encountered enough of them to make a choice. And so I think our experience with a number of students is they have a sense that they might want to do something in, say, health or state and local finance or education, but they don't have a great deal of specifics about it. And in the process of doing things and checking out the options and possibly working with somebody on a project or something, they begin to find things that really intrigue them that they hadn't been exposed to before.
Right.
And that's often one of the real benefits of going on to graduate school. I mean, in my case, I was sure I was going to do something, and I didn't encounter some things for the first time until in graduate schools. And I made some different choices. I don't think my original ones were bad choices. I didn't have quite the information that I was going to have shortly after getting into graduate school, starting to see some of the other options that were available. And so, what I do now is quite different than what I thought I was going to do. Although to some people it might seem close, it seems to me very different than what I had very firm idea of what I was going to do. And of course, I'm nowhere near that in terms of things. Part of it is serendipity, and part of it is just quite simply being exposed to things I had not encountered before. So, and so there's an element of that as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the general idea is good for now, and make more specifics. I mean, I was working at Fidelity in Chicago, figuring out the most cost-effective way to structure health plans for major Fortune 500 companies. So we were kind of the bad guys in many cases, but it was very interesting, and I saw just actually the huge problem with the aging population and how it's affecting the private industry, and especially with healthcare. And being from Michigan, I see General Motors as having being more in the pension business than they are in the car business, or
So if we go back to the having taught at Michigan years ago and stuff, we know that both sides lost the piece of Detroit, right?
Yes.
And things. That's the resolution to a major strike in the 50s and things. So, yeah, but that's true. But the other thing is that a lot of what's going on right now doesn't make sense either.
Right.
So I would argue, and in fact, this is part of what I'm teaching. I'm Will Manning. I'm teaching the health economics course this quarter and a half for the last couple of years. And my area of specialty is actually insurance. Is that what we have, unlike the rest of the world, is we piggybacked the whole system on the employment sector, but didn't do it thinking of it as a source of payroll taxes. We actually made it the responsibility of the employer. That's absolutely perverse.
Right.
And it's also an accident. And the accident actually goes back to Michigan. So how did they get all of those workers to go to work out at places like Willow Run and like the B-24 factory out there and IPSI and all of those kinds of places? During World War II, they couldn't raise wages to get them to go to the plants. So they got the Wage and Price Control Board to say they could offer fringe benefits. And it wouldn't be counted as a way around as wages. And then through a series of things, with the involvement in part of the UAW, it got codified into the tax law. And so we have a system which was not designed to be a health benefit. In fact, one of the major areas of application was paid vacation in World War II. So it was designed as a runaround to get around the ability to attract workers into the war plants in the upper Midwest, because that was the arsenal of democracy during World War II. And of course, the biggest concentration of it was in Michigan. And now we have that system, and most Americans think that doing it through the employer is the natural way to do it. They don't realize that it actually is just an accident.
Huh. Hey, I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And one of the implications of it is, if we think about the new bill that went through, what's going to happen when those low-wage workers don't have a choice but have to take up the insurance, or their employers have to provide it to them or pay the fine? One of the implications of that is that the demand for certain kinds of labor is going to go down, because employers, as you know from what you've been doing, care about total compensation costs. Right?
They're much about the bottom line, even though they say they're...
Right. We'll take account of the tax treatment, and we'll be very careful, but we know that low-wage workers don't pay much other than Social Security and Medicare taxes. So there'll be a shift. We've seen it happen before. It's happened multiple times in the U.S. with other changes. And so if they don't make up the problems with the Senate bill, in terms of under-provision of assistance to low-wage workers, one of the issues that could come up is that low-wage workers will actually be worse off because the Senate was too stingy on things. So, what you went through and what you've been doing actually is very relevant, although it's actually, it's like the QWERTY keyboard. It's, one of these accidents of history that was done for some completely other different reason that's no longer relevant, but, we still type with this archaic keyboard. Nobody bothers to learn the Dvorak keyboard or anything of that sort.
Right. Well, and also on kind of the other side of the spectrum, because my dad is a physician and is very concerned about the quality of healthcare, and he's a retired physician, so he's was practicing before really insurance companies clamped down on compensation for doctors, but I've just heard chatter about the relative quality of medicine and how it correlates to this new bill and insurance, the way that it is and the way that it might transform. And I know that the doctors, for one reason or another, many are concerned about the quality because in many cases, although doctors are supposed to be idealists and working for the public good, they're also businessmen. And is there going to be, or are there any studies showing decreasing quality, or is that completely irrelevant? And also, what are they? I'm not familiar with what doctors are going to be paid with the various insurance levels. My experience over in Germany is doctors are required to take so many patients that, although they're on social health, but they get worse treatment, and they are found, they have much longer lines, whereas the private patients zip right through. And I think that that's widely known, but is that going to be, a coming event in the United States? We are kind of the global power in health.
It's kind of already happening with like uninsured versus insured.
Right, but a lot of things actually aren't going to change much at all. Okay. So 60% of the people have coverage among through their employer who are under 65, and that system is not going to change much. What will change is that some of the uninsured, who are low-wage workers who are working for firms that offer insurance, will now have to take it up.
Okay.
And things. And then you have to worry about how the bill gets split in terms of whether it comes back as a reduction in wages or whether there's enough money in the Senate bill to do it, and which is something that can be fixed. So it's not a fault of the structure, it's just a question of getting the numbers to match up. We've got a group of people who now work for employers who can't offer insurance, and they're going to be exempt, and they're going to have to go to the exchanges. And the exchanges are going to depend on what the states do. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine, being a Wisconsin alum, that what will happen in Wisconsin is going to be a little different than what happens in some places, just because, different states differ an awful lot. The upper Midwest will be very different than, say, what would happen in Mississippi or Texas or things of that sort. But it's going to be through whatever process the states set up to do it. And the ones who end up being picked up by the Medicaid programs will just reflect the current structure of Medicaid. But in every case, the people who are uninsured will be getting something they don't have now. Right. And admittedly, in some states, it's not really very good. And actually, Illinois, unfortunately, I have to say, is one of the states that's not great. It expanded benefits, or I should say, Governor Blagojevich expanded benefits, but didn't pay bills. And needless to say, the doctors have been reluctant to take on and have curtailed their taking up of Medicaid patients. So some of those people may not have something that's much better than being uninsured. But in lots of states, they are really quite good programs. Wisconsin's got a very good one. Minnesota has a very good one. For a different group of people, California is very good. And so they really will get a bump up in terms of both their access and such. And then it's a question on the Medicaid programs of how the states decide to pay and when to pay. Hopefully in something less than a year's time, which was what it is in Illinois. And doctors have to wait a year to get paid.
What's going to be really interesting is the effect on undocumented aliens. Because right now, I happen to know one who goes to a doctor, and the doctor treats and all of that, and it's just treats them as, you know, a regular uninsured patient. But now with the requirement to have insurance, then you can't get it if you're not documented, you know. So I'm curious about what's going to happen in terms of all those like emergency room visits that happen with people who are uninsured, whether or not they're legal.
Well, aren't they in an emergency room? Aren't they required by law to
It varies a lot by state. So what you can pay with federal money is limited by the new law, with basically the same rules as Peraro did for welfare reform. And that's when Medicaid got split off from AFDC. It's now TANA and things. But states, a number of states as a state option, actually provide coverage for their immigrants. So the reason I was talking about California is it's one of the states that has opted to actually extend coverage to undocumented aliens and such. And under Peraro rules, by the way, it's not just undocumented aliens, it's people in the first 5 years that they're here legally, too. So I don't know how that one stood up, but you know, they also extend it to people who came here legally or in the process of getting things, and who, for whatever reason, meet the income and asset thresholds.
And is there any worry about...
And for pregnant women, it's important because, of course, we don't use the usual thresholds. We go up to 185% of poverty with presumptive eligibility, that if they're poor, and until we know that they're not pregnant, they're eligible for Medicaid services. And that's been true for quite some time in the U.S. And stuff. And now it's also true even of this group that doesn't quite fit the world post-Peraro in several states where it really matters. Now, obviously, there's some states where it doesn't work. And I always thought of it as the opposite ends of I-35. So I-35 runs through Austin, Minnesota, and near Austin, Texas, and it's the southern end of I-35 that's the problem.
Right.
Because it's very hard to get, even if you're eligible, to get actually enrolled in Texas.
Okay. So is there any worry about, I mean, I don't know all the particulars behind the healthcare bill, so this might not even be a good question, but is there any worry about possible abuse of the system with this new...
Well, abuse of the system is there's several ways in which you can think about abuse, because right now we have a fair amount of abuse going on, even of the Medicare program. And so one of the things that came up in the debate was doing a better job of catching people who are using it in ways that they shouldn't be. And that's on both sides of the transaction, both the patients and the providers. And things. And it's thought to be a real problem, for example, in southern Florida is one of the places where it's thought to be an issue, as well as McAllen, Texas, I think is the one that got so much play in the Post. Wasn't that McAllen, Texas, the Gatawanda paper that was in Atlantic that was discussed so extensively in the Post? I think it's the McAllen, Texas. And stuff. So there are these pockets where people are kind of push the limits and stuff. There's the whole question of eligibility and policing the system. And it's, you know, one of the things you have to do in any system like this, especially one where there are multiple ways you can come into the system is you have to provide some way of sort of checking to see whether people are doing what they're supposed to do. One of the things that's interesting about the bill is that, basically if you don't, it looks like it has some self-policing aspects to it. Doesn't mean it can't be manipulated in a variety of ways. And there will be some questions of working out the rules and what constitutes things that are just within the line versus things that are beyond the line and stuff. So if you have to pay your fine to the Internal Revenue Service, which is my understanding of the way it gets done, and you're going to be, let's say you're a poor working individual who didn't have insurance or self-employed, there will be a mechanism through that. For one group, it's not because you're paying income taxes, but you use that to get the EITC and things and other aspects of it. And in the other case, of course, you are paying income taxes as self-employed, unless you found a way to do all of your business off the books. And then in which case, you're of greater interest to the Internal Revenue Service than the fact that you haven't paid the health tax and stuff. So those are important issues to think about in terms of doing. But, we have problems in the regular system. I don't know if you went through this in the work you were doing, but one of the things that employers actually think about is that they know that when people leave their employment, they use their cards until they get caught. And one of the decisions that a lot of firms made some time ago, and it was actually an active decision, was that it was good to go through this annual period because that will allow you to catch the people who'd left. The people who came to you, of course, they would sign up as fast as they were eligible, whether it was immediate eligibility or whatever, 6 months up to 30 months delay. And Kaiser actually went through and did a study that, if I remember correctly, got published, is they decided how often they had to go out and make sure that the people who were coming to Kaiser and using Kaiser services actually were still eligible for Kaiser. And they did a trade-off, the kind of trade-off you'd expect somebody with a business background to think about. It's going to cost money to do it. We don't want to do it too often. But at the same time, the longer we make it run, the more we lose money by serving people we have, no business serving because they're not really our patients or our customers. And so, those decisions get made. There's always going to be some slop because people are changing jobs, they're moving and things. If they're new to the area, they're going to let you know about it, unless they happen to be completely averse to traditional medicine. But they may not be forthcoming about turning in their card when they leave. Some will, some won't. So.
I didn't go over that, but that's interesting. I suppose that any employee could do that.
Yeah. And if the employer, my mom was in this situation. She resigned from a job and tried to apply for COBRA, and it was for the DC public school system, and they were like, we don't have anyone who knows how to do that.
Oh, really?
So she was trying for a long time to try and get on COBRA so that she could continue to use that insurance, but they So it's not even just the people manipulating it. It could be the employer that just screws up. But you would think that I was just amazed that could go on, because I just thought, of course, there's like a computer switch. You just done. No longer covered. But,
Well, I know from having been on the benefits committee here that some systems don't talk to each other.
Right.
So one of the most difficult things at the U of C, and I've talked, one of the things that health economists do, by the way, is they sit on benefits committees. So many of my colleagues sit on benefit committees at other universities. One of the hardest things for them to do is actually send out the relevant information to people at open enrollment, where you've got the default to stay on your winter plan, because the payroll system doesn't talk to the benefit system. They were built at different times. They have different systems, and not every place has gone back and integrated them. And here we wanted to do a survey of people, and we wanted to make sure we got random samples of all the major employee groups, so it would be a stratified random sample. And that meant linking the two systems, and it turned into a nightmare. This was only about 8 years ago, I think, that we did that and stuff. But they only go through that process once a year for open enrollment, and they had that one down, but it was just a snapshot. Kind of a setting.
I think educating anyone, people, institutions, companies, you name it, on health, all of the options. We were trying to motivate employees to go and open up and participate in the HSA, in an HSA versus other, because of the cost savings. And it was nearly impossible to change people's patterns or to make people not short-sighted about what's going out the door tomorrow versus the amount that's going out the door at the end of the year. And so we were much more on the private end of that.
Well, I'm a little surprised because my impression was that FSAs, these flexible spending accounts, are actually quite popular, and that people actually understand them.
They do, but I mean, HSAs are kind of what, at least what we were really promoting for people, because the FSA, your amount runs out, right? And the HSA carries over. And
except actually, there's usually money left over at the end.
Right, and so. I don't know, just trying to convince people that there was this HSA isn't like this big, bad, scary thing, and if you contribute to it, you're going to end up saving money, and it was tax advantaged, and all of that it was very difficult. And I went out. I traveled to a bunch of energy companies, actually out in the West, to oil fields, and talking to employees about this and just trying to educate them, and it was very difficult. And so I think on the very personal level, it interests me just because I was dealing with people in both the financial side, their investments, because we were at Fidelity and I was doing lots of mutual fund education, and then the healthcare stuff. But it was interesting for me to get that face-to-face contact with people that are actually dealing with these issues versus the people that are making the decisions and the people that are reaping the rewards or falling behind.
Well, I've often thought that this is sort of adding all the extra features actually confuses people.
I think so.
Yeah.
I really think so.
So if it were just a simple large deductible plan, which admittedly takes us more back to MSAs, and it didn't have all the savings and some of the other things, the special accounts for prevention and all that sort of thing, then people begin to have a hard time. And that's not inconsistent with the problem that people had in 2006 when Part D went online, or the problems that used to happen on supplementals for Medicare, in which the government finally said, okay, we're going to have a few basic options out there. We're not going to entertain all possible options. But if you make the decision making really quite complex for them, some people just shut down. In fact, Thaler, Professor Thaler over here, of course, he and his group are quite famous for the work that they've done on sort of the behavioral approach. And one of the things is to set up systems so that people can opt, when they make a choice, they opt into them by default, and things if you think they're actually better for them.